What's the most too far you've ever seen a high school prank go? So the senior class 2 years ahead of me forked the lawn in front of the school. A classic, right? Well, they took it a bit further. Instead of buying plastic forks in bulk, the seniors, for their whole school year, methodically pocketed the metal silverware from lunch and breakfast. Not every piece every time, but just enough that the lunch staff would think it was accidental loss. We have a small class size, so kids would bust their own trays by dumping the scraps into big trash cans, and sometimes people would forget to take their silverware off first and they'd get lost. We had regular announcements at lunch reminding us to make sure we didn't throw away the utensils. So in this massive conspiracy that only they knew about, they collected hundreds of metal utensils. The night before their last day of classes, they snuck into the school grounds and methodically stuck hundreds of forks, knives, and spoons into the grass a foot apart each. To make it worse, one of the 2 custodians had recently been fired, and the remaining custodian was an older guy who was perfectly kind and in an ideal world should have retired sooner. He had to pick them all up by himself. I heard one of the teachers came in early and helped him a little bit, and saw the custodian had tears falling down his cheeks. A group of kids staged a kidnapping one time. They borrowed a van and drove in front of a busy shopping center. One guy, pretending to escape, jumped out the trunk all wrapped up in duct tape. To the horror of all the bystanders, the van stopped, 2 kids ran out and recaptured the escapee and drove off. Cops had to go to their homes when the van was identified, and they had a lot of clearing up to do. When I was a freshman, there was a tree that was planted when the school was founded. The seniors destroyed it. Everyone was ducking pissed. Something similar happened at my school, except the tree was a baby tree planted in memorial of a teacher that had been killed in a car accident. On a few occasions it was vandalized pretty heavily by whoever trying to pull it out of the ground with a truck. Another time it was basically split right down the middle. I think the school just pulled it up eventually. Not seen, but the senior class before I was a freshman had dumped whole buckets of crickets into all of the school's garbage cans. Fast forward, a fight broke out at lunch, and a student was knocked into one of the garbage cans and thousands of crickets spilt out onto the concourse, causing a massive riot. I'm talking mobs of kids leaving the school. The school was infested with crickets for years. At my high school when I was a freshman, a group of seniors had broken into the school the night before with hundreds of bottles of lube to grease up all the staircases in the school. Like 15 kids went to the hospital. One kid cracked his head open and had to be rushed to the ER. When I was a sophomore, a group did the same thing at my school. But they also greased the handrails, handicap ramp, and a wooden memorial bench. The bench was ruined. And I don't know what they used, but after it was cleaned it would come back every time it rained. Dude in my school had a crummy old car that the lock was broken and could easily be put in neutral and pushed around. The steering still locked, so mostly kids would push it into a parking space ahead or behind of it. One day they pushed it and it got away from them and it damaged a teacher's car. The kids owned up to it, but considering the owner was so sick of his car being messed with, he called the police. Turns out moving a car a few meters is considered vehicle theft around here, and 3 kids were charged and expelled. Someone let a greased pig loose in the school. It basically ran around and was pretty funny. Teachers did try to catch him, but basically they opened doors and figured the pig would run outside. The janitor went caveman and killed the pig with a broken broom handle. Blood all over the floor. Janitor was fired that day. This is around a week after the Parkland shooting in Florida. Some freshmen thought it would be a cool idea to bring in a BB pistol during school hours. All the staff thought he was an actual school shooter, and there were a lockdown with everyone ready to throw some heavy books at the first person who came in their rooms. He got expelled, and some say that he got sent to juvie. Edit, I should probably provide more context. The dude was planning to play a prank on a friend of his by pulling out the BB gun. And that's how I spent 3 hours in my chem class panicking. Also how the staff realized. A year before I transferred to a school, I learned that some seniors greased the steps with baby oil, causing students to slip and fall, including teachers, one of which was several months pregnant. The principal ordered that they do not get to walk for graduation. There was this whole mess with the parents fighting to get the punishment overturned. Some of the students got punished and others got to walk for graduation. The parents were like, no one got seriously hurt and it was just a prank. But seriously? At high school, someone in my year group decided it would be a funny idea to run and tackle a bin that was leaning on a pole. He then pretended to be unconscious, and as the group of students watched on, rumors started to go around that he jumped off the second-story walkway and tackled the pole in the air and then fell towards the ground. He continued to pretend to be unconscious, and as soon as the ambulance arrived to check on his injuries, he suddenly jumped up and ran off into the distance and out of the school. A couple of underclassmen crashed a wholesome senior prank and ruined it. The original prank was spray painting the graduating class year all over the building in washable paint, but these kids came by after they were done and did swears and slurs. The graduating class almost didn't walk until parents kept complaining that their kids wasn't at fault. They ended up having to do whatever they did to cover up the writings, and there was still a pillow with a dick on it for a few weeks after. In senior year, my genius classmates thought it would be a good idea to take all the books out of the library and make a giant book mountain. Needless to say, we spent around 7 hours learning the Dewey Decimal System. I was livid when the administration forced our whole class to resort the books, even though it was like 3 idiots who made the whole mess. Someone bought multiple bottles of this stuff called liquid ass and absolutely poured like 10 bottles of the stuff in the men's restroom. It was truly the smell of putrid, rotting dead elephant shit. It was horrendous. If I smelled a dead body, it would be the second worst thing I've ever smelled. It was that bad. Our poor janitor was assigned to clean it up, and so he walked in and immediately projectile vomited all over the bathroom and quit the job on the spot. We were now out a janitor, and the mess now had the new addition of vomit on top of 10 bottles of liquid ass. It took a while to find a new janitor, so the vomit just sort of sat there for a week, and it was basically a biohazard at that point. A new janitor eventually cleaned the mess in a full body suit, but even after bleaching everything we could still smell it for over 6 months. They had to permanently remove the front door to that bathroom. During one of my siblings' tenure, a few students broke into the gymnasium and turned hoses onto the basketball court. Completely ruined everything as it ran a good part of the night. I believe they caught and expelled all of them. My class had a few people super glue as many door locks they could reach. That really made everyone happy. Why the old, carry the teacher's Volkswagen into the quad prank that at least only caused some inconvenience and not property damage became a thing of the past, I'll never know. This actually happened at a friend's school. A guy found a dead pigeon, and the class decided it would be fun to hide it inside a hardcover folder that a teacher left on her desk. The only problem was that the pigeon would bulge the folder, so they had no better idea than to put it inside and stomp the folder, and pigeon, flat. When the teacher, she was pregnant at the time, opened the folder, she yelled in terror and fainted. They took her out in an ambulance. On the next day, the principal informed the class that the teacher suffered a miscarriage and that they were lucky if she didn't press any charges. Needless to say, they never told anyone whose idea it was or who participated in the prank. I wouldn't call this a prank, but a kid once wrote the name of another kid in his own shit on the toilet wall. This was a fate worse than death for the unsuspecting victim. Cries of derision could be heard throughout the building. Malicious rumors were spread for weeks. The poor kid was subjected to a social death sentence, a dead man walking. It wasn't until a fateful rainy Thursday afternoon, after P, that the wrongly accused was exonerated when the real shitasso fell victim to his own hubris and was caught brown-handed in the act of fecal graffiti. I broke into my friend's middle school email account in the middle of the night to send his current email address a message from the future. This message was inspired by that one prank from the office where Jim sends Dwight faxes from the future about the coffee being poisoned. My dumbass took it one step farther and said that my friend needed to stop me and my other friend from playing the piano at break, as otherwise a bomb would go off. My friend took this seriously and alerted a teacher, who immediately knew it was me. Yeah, the police were called, my ass nearly suspended, and I was grounded for a month. Going back about 15 years ago, a group of 10 to 13 senior kids decided to raid our community school and literally rip off all tube lights, bend all ceiling fans, smash some walls, etc. There was quite a substantial amount of damage. At that time CCTVs weren't all that famous or used, so it was difficult to identify, but luckily there were some eyewitnesses and the boys and their parents were immediately summoned. Kids suspended and parents were asked to foot the bill. Oh. And the kids were named and shamed in front of the whole community. Edit, grammar. One guy from my school sprayed some pepper spray in the air during class because he thought it'd only make everyone's eyes sting a little. Ended up with some students almost suffocating to death, the whole floor getting evacuated, and the guy getting expelled. This was actually in middle school. The bathrooms had particularly low ceilings. One day some boys went into the girls' bathroom during class time, I guess when the least amount of people would be in there, and somehow managed to get a chair up into the ceiling tiles. Many girls knew they did this and we all thought it was pretty funny. We forgot about the chair for like a week until it came crashing down onto a girl who was using the toilet. This girl was very frail and super underweight, it came down and knocked her out. The school went on lockdown while the paramedics took her to the hospital. She was fine. They locked the bathrooms the rest of the year and only opened them between classes. Many kids would go to the nurse to use the bathroom when they couldn't hold it in class. For a senior prank at my HS, a group of kids stole a ton, if not all I can't remember, of the bathroom stall doors. While the administration was trying to figure out who did it / how to replace all the missing doors, they had makeshift plywood doors installed. They eventually caught the kids who did it and formally charged them with theft and a few other things. It was pretty genius, though. To pay the legal fees, the kids got a shitload of t-shirts printed with the phrase "I prefer the plywood," and most of the school bought them in solidarity. So, all in all, a kind of heartwarming ending to a too-far situation. During every winter, this giant flock of seagulls would always show up at my high school and hang out around campus until springtime. The majority of students ate lunch outside in this huge central courtyard. The seagulls were so annoying and constantly hovering and pretty much begging for food. It was also common to get your food stolen by one if you weren't looking. One day a fellow student had some string in his backpack. So we took 6 feet or so piece of string, tied a bite-sized piece of pizza to one end, and an empty 20 ounces soda bottle to the other. We then proceeded to throw the contraption into a group of seagulls. We never thought they'd fall for it. One seagull swallowed the pizza and started to fly across campus with the string and bottle floating behind him, hanging from his beak. The rest of the seagulls freaked out and were flying behind him as if they were chasing him. The funniest part was that a random female student looked up, saw what she believed to be a floating empty soda bottle, and screamed in horror, "OMG, that bottle is floating." The seagull then vomited up the pizza string contraption and went about his life unharmed. We felt really bad after that and decided not to prank the seagulls anymore. Continued, a few days later some younger kids, freshmen, tried to mimic our little prank. Except it all went wrong for them. A seagull fell for the bait, but ended up getting caught in a tree. The freshmen then started to panic, fearing they'd be in trouble if caught, and had to boost each other up to free the seagull from the tree. The seagull was fine and flew away, but after that, the pranking of seagulls came to an official end. My old high school had a rivalry with another high school in the same district. Years ago the football teams would play pranks on each other. They escalated to the point of the other high school killing a black cat and hanging it from a tree at our school. Our mascot was the Panthers. My brother's senior class decided it'd be a fun prank to break into the school at night. They put dead fish in lockers, shaving cream all down the halls, and broke into the main office and smashed some computers. They then egged the outside for good measure. That hallway smelled like shit for a good month after. None of them faced any legal consequences because one of the kids' dad is a lawyer, but I think they lost their scholarships. Not necessarily a high school prank, but childish nonetheless. I was in the car business and a couple guys went back and forth pranking each other's cars. I don't remember the second to last move, but the final was a little over the top in my opinion. The finisher decided he'd had enough and removed the metal bottom door plate holder car, and lined the underneath with sardines. Once he screwed the plate back on, no one could figure out where the rotten stink was coming from. We didn't all hear until later what he actually did, but the guy he did it to ended up selling his car at a loss because he couldn't get rid of the smell. We had a school project to make an ad for something in our town, so we borrowed the school's video camera and a mannequin from the art department, went to the top of a big cliff that's right in the middle of our town and set up a bungee jumping platform before throwing the dummy off with a rope tied to its leg. About 10 minutes later there were 5 cop cars screaming up the hill and a bunch of paramedics running to the bottom, because someone called the emergency line about a group of teenagers throwing someone over the edge. This is probably gonna get lost in the ocean of comments, but a guy I know in college had a house arrest bracelet thingy around his ankle when he came in as a freshman. Turns out him and his friend posed as a hooker on Craigslist or some other website and ended up having a conversation with their high school principal, married at the time, during which nudes were exchanged. Principal had no idea, and once the two idiots got the nudes, they then proceeded to extort the principal for money. Cops got involved and the whole thing turned into a shit show. Not too sure how he got off, but he probably has a record or something. So that's a prank that went a little too far. Not entirely sure if it was a prank or someone's awful idea of revenge, but once someone emptied a water bottle, puked in it, then threw Mentos in and put it all in a locker. That shit exploded and the whole hallway smelled like vomit for ages. I would always hold my breath for as long as I could when I had to walk past it. Perhaps not a prank per se, but we were doing group assignments where we were supposed to write and then act out a play that described hardships which related to human rights violations. My group had written some stuff about a fugitive family and we had a baby doll as a prop. As we played it out on stage in front of the rest of the school, one of the guys decides to improvise. So he took the doll and started raping it in the ass, in very elaborate moves. And it went on, and on. For so long. And due to group mentality most of the audience were laughing their asses off, except the teachers, which to put it mildly were giving us death stares. After our play everyone had to leave the hall except us. Sure got our asses told that day. Had to attend meetings with the staff later and have parents sign on meeting notes and stuff. I guess it was just a display of youthful ignorance. The concept of rape was just abstract to most of us. Thinking back now, I am sure, due to statistics, that someone in the audience could relate more. Feels bad. Wasn't my doing, but still,